Hey everybody, Dave with Mars Consulting Group. Thanks for coming on here. The next session is one of my favorite people that we're bringing into the equation here. It's Vivek. He's the CEO, co-founder of Weave, and you can see his topic there. I can tell you from working with Weave for a while that this AI and that he has built that has so many great use cases and can be used in so many different ways. So if you this is pretty focused what we're going to be talking about here, but keep in mind, if this is something that you are looking for your organization, feel free to reach out to me or Vivek. You'll have his contact information, and you can certainly discuss your corporate needs, and from there have a conversation. But without further ado, I'll kick it over to you, sir, and I will sit in the background here and jump off in case if you need me, you know how to get a hold of me. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to be talking about empathetic AI. How can we understand and address employee needs at scale? Quick background on myself. My name is Vivek. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Weave. Weave is a employee feedback and engagement platform built on conversational AI. Today, we're going to touch on the concepts of empathy at work, how we approach that at Weave, and we hope that you're able to both see some cool technology, but also take away some principles on how to build a employee feedback and engagement process at your own businesses. So as everyone knows, we are in the new normal. There is this implicit understanding among all senior leaders that employees have to feel safe, heard, and supported. In fact, since COVID-19, what we're seeing is that about 95% of senior leaders are demonstrating a sincere interest in employee well-being and safety. That's up from about 60% the year prior. We're also in the midst of this forced transformation of the way that we do work. As we all know, work from home is here to stay for a large percentage of us. We could see up to 50 million jobs become permanently remote, or at the very least, many of these jobs are going to become flex work. What that means is we have to be successful in the transformation. It also means that there is new ways that we need to consider how we think about leadership itself. There is this immediate need to have a continuous engaging and two-way dialogue with employees, especially in a world where you don't have your casual water cooler type conversations. So with all this background, which everyone is familiar with, the question really becomes, how do we project that sense of safety, competence, and empowerment? How do we create a culture of empathy and one of understanding? How do we make sure that we're understanding and engaging, not just from a top-down approach, but understanding the needs of every employee on the ground from the bottom up? And most critically, how do we achieve and communicate rapid issue to action cycles? Meaning, how can we get from understanding employee needs to resolving them as fast as possible? So the first question is, how do we create a culture of empathy and trust? And to answer that, first we need to know what trust itself is. According to the trust barometer from Edelman, there's really three things that make up trust. There is competence, meaning, do I think you do things well? Voice, meaning, do I feel like you give me the opportunity to speak? And ethics, do I feel like you are doing the right thing? Another way to say this would be that empathy itself is the foundation of how we establish trust and how employees in particular build trust with their leadership and with their organizations. Now, empathy is an extremely nebulous concept, especially when we're looking at the business world. And what we see is that it often is something that is espoused kind of as a talking point, but never really becomes something tangible. That's because empathy is not a program that we can deploy. It's a core value and core values have to be unified across an organization. It has to permeate from leadership, HR, management, communication down to the employee level. And there needs to be a clear narrative where employees are not having a different experience when they're working with one manager versus another, or when they're talking to their direct managers versus their senior leaders. So what is empathy itself? From our experience, we've broken it down into 4 main pieces. So the dictionary definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. But these 4 things, we think, put it into more context. First is someone cares enough about me and my issues and my needs to ask for my thoughts. Second, they understand what I've shared with them, and importantly, they've communicated that they've understood what I've said. What this means is if a manager is having a one-on-one check-in with an employee, the check-in itself constitutes as that first step. They cared enough to schedule that time and to understand an employee's needs. Second is a common technique in these kinds of conversations of mirroring what an employee is saying, just to kind of affirm that what you're saying is not glazing over me, going over my head. I'm hearing you, and the things that you're saying are important. The next step is that that's not the end of the road. It's not just giving the opportunity for employees to have like a complaint box to dump all their needs. Instead, it's the start of a longer term process where you're keeping employees in the loop in every step of the way. For example, if you find from an employee conversation that that employee doesn't feel like they have a clear career path defined, or they don't know what their next promotion cycle is going to look like, the conversation shouldn't end there. Instead, that feedback should go into some form of action planning, whether or not it's going to directly address the employee's issue or not. Keeping that employee informed of, hey, we heard you, and these are the changes that are happening in our upskilling program in response. Or we heard you and we're not making any changes right now, but these are the areas in which you can get involved, or this is what the next steps can look like from your point of view. The important thing is it's not a black box. There are clear next steps, and it's a joint journey getting there. And finally, this is not a one-off conversation. It is an ongoing interaction. What you don't want to happen is an employee feels that if I don't get out all of my issues and concerns in my one-on-one meeting that I have with my manager once a quarter, I've lost my chance. And now I have to wait 3 months before I can voice my needs again. Instead, there should be an expectation that this is just one step of a continuous and ongoing interaction. And there's going to continue to be a transparent and open back and forth. Now, how can we translate these kind of general concepts and put that into what does empathy look like in the workplace? There's 3 things that we look at. One is there are company communications that keep employees informed on what's going well and what's not going well. Second, direct managers are demonstrating sincere care for employee needs. And you saw from the stat at the top, most managers do feel that, and they are demonstrating it. The key point is that employees should understand that that is the relationship, and it shouldn't be overshadowed by other dynamics in the workplace. And finally, the feedback process itself is something that needs to be trusted to affect change. If employees feel like they're just going to be throwing feedback into a void, either because there's never going to be a response, or there's never going to be next steps or actionability that comes from issues that they raise, or even more dangerously, if they feel that the feedback that they provide is something that's going to be used against them in the future, then you have a breakdown of trust and empathy. So a critical piece is the employees should understand, if I engage, then my voice is going to be heard. So how do we hear the voice of every employee? This is a harder question than it seems. It's not for lack of trying from the manager perspective. So we recently ran a report surveying about 300 some odd people leaders to understand what does their communication with their employees look like, what channels are they using, what's working for them, what's not working from them. And what we found is, I think this was the most shocking statistic, is that managers are spending an average of 29 hours a week just in communications with employees, whether that's in one-on-one meetings or in team meetings or in emails or on Slack or Teams, sending DMs. Vast amounts of time are being spent purely in communication. Now, I don't think I need to explain that this is obviously something that is unscalable. If the team grows, the only next step is the quality of communication will drop and trying to support that. This is something that's becoming increasingly more difficult with distributed and flex work styles. And most critically, it risks burnout of the manager. This is not something that people can continue doing forever. Now, what we do often in order to understand the employee voice and create that channel for employees to voice their needs are employee surveys. Some organizations are doing this from like a very traditional legacy standpoint, where they're doing a survey once a year, once every 2 years sometimes. And your more progressive organizations might be doing pulse style surveying more often. Now, there's a couple of problems with this concept. First is that the survey alone is not enough. From an employee's perspective, this is often that untrusted black box that I was referring to. Employees don't feel that engaging in surveys is going to result in tangible change. Those surveys tend to be very broad scope and not specific to what is important and relevant in an employee's life at that time period. And very importantly, they don't create actionable steps for leaders to actually improve the issues of their teams. Now, this is because of the mechanism of this kind of data capture to begin with, right? Because surveys are meant for getting data that's going to drive strategic, top-down kinds of decisions. And the pathway that we often see is this is a process that's run by HR. They're collecting the data. They're creating reports that goes up to leadership. Those reports then disseminate back down to management, and there might be some actionable next steps that come out of it. That's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that's not specific to employee needs on the ground. And in fact, what we found is at your average organization, it takes about 18 months to get from the point of identifying an employee's need to actually resolving it. In 18 months, that employee most likely is gone if they've been experiencing the same issue for a year and a half. So what are the best practices for feedback? A couple of things that we've found is everything has to matter. Every question that you're asking to employees has to have immediate and direct relevance to the things that they're dealing with at that time. And bundling the process with buy-in and explanations on how participation is actually going to help drive the needle on issues employees may be facing. It might be hard to conceptualize how do you have check-ins that both allow for kind of open-ended feedback from employees, but at the same time is very targeted. What we found to be very effective is to have event-triggered check-ins. So if you've recently had a go live of a new product, or there's an ongoing cutover, or some event has happened in the workplace, you know that there's going to be something going on. We have a client that's a manufacturing plant, and their floor manager told me, if this machine on the floor runs 2 degrees too hot, I know that these 5 guys had a bad day, because that meant that they were stuck fixing that machine all day. So that's a trigger point for them to check in with employees and see how they're doing. The second piece relates to what I was just talking about, which is eliminating bureaucratic cycles, rather than going from HR to employee to HR to leadership to manager to employee. Have very direct team-based feedback cycles where you're identifying and committing to a single communication channel. So from an employee's perspective, there shouldn't be confusion or lack of clarity on, am I supposed to be voicing my needs on this Slack channel, or am I supposed to send an email, or do I go to my manager in person? Do I answer the survey? Like, where is the one place that I'm supposed to go when I need to get something resolved in a timely manner? And the final piece, and this is something that we often get some pushback on, is that you should be very aggressive in response to employee feedbacks, employee needs. That means response to employee feedback within 2 days, just acknowledging that you heard them, kind of going back to those 4 pieces that make up empathy in the workplace. Acknowledging that you haven't just shouted into the void. Someone's on the other end, they heard you. And then where possible, fix issues within 2 weeks. So you're having a issue to action cycle that's dropping from 1.5 years to only 14 days. This may seem unreasonably fast depending on the type of issue. There's a few things that we can do to speed that up. And that's actually where a lot of our technology pieces come in. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But one key piece is you can actually accelerate timelines and increase transparency by engaging employees in the solution building process. So we've talked a lot about theory. What are the things that we actually need to be specifically talking to employees about? What we know is that employee needs are rapidly changing. As your company culture adjusts, as the new normal sets in, especially now as we're kind of moving from remote work into flex work and trying to figure out what that looks like, employee needs are becoming increasingly unique and increasingly fast changing. This time last year, we were looking at the top issues as being mental health related around remote work technology and remote work environment. Those are still important key priorities, but now we're seeing issues with flex work and safety returning to the office and diversity, equity, and inclusion kinds of issues. What all of this means is that we're at a very pivotal point for the employee experience. There's this intersection of rapidly changing employee needs, changes in the way that we work, and that culminates in a dramatic change in the employee interaction experience. It necessitates ways to overcome challenges that didn't exist when we could just grab a conference room in an office building. We need a continuous two-way dialogue. Now, if you are at a small organization, I can have that dialogue one-on-one with every employee on a daily basis, and it really wouldn't be too difficult. But what do you do if you're at a larger size organization, or if you have a distributed workforce where it's not possible to have that kind of one-on-one contact in person on a regular basis? That's why we created Weave. Weave is the first employee engagement platform that's built with what we call empathetic AI. You'll see what I mean by that in a minute. We empower people leaders to rapidly understand and address employee needs. Engaging with employees means communicating with them, having a conversation to understand the issues that they're facing and taking the steps and actions in order to resolve those issues in a timely manner. And like I mentioned, easy to envision how you do that at a single digit company. How do we do that at scale? And that's where I want you to meet Kim. Kim is an always available empathetic chatbot that has organic conversation with employees to understand their issues and needs. She lives on your messaging channel, so like a Slack or Microsoft Teams, email, SMS, basically wherever your employees are already used to communicating with their coworkers, Kim lives there, and the experience is no different than as if they were DMing with a coworker. The idea being feedback, especially when you're trying to create an ongoing conversation between employees and leaders. Check-ins and conversation with employees can't be a giant break in their workflows. If you're asking them to set aside huge blocks of time, or they need to go log into a different system and break concentration on what they're currently doing, you're just going to lose a lot of people because of convenience and logistics. So we do our best to have the most organic experience that lives within the applications that they're already using on a daily basis. There's no login, and the experience itself, as you're going to see in a few minutes, is fairly natural. Another really important piece about the way that we've built Kim and what we mean by empathetic AI is creating the right space for very honest feedback. So we've got this unique combination of the anonymity that comes from the chat experience combined with empathy to build trust and create the space for employees to be open and honest and transparent. Now, what we mean by empathy from like a chatbot's point of view, because a technology is never going to emulate true empathy from a human. In this case, from the employee's perspective, what empathy means is Kim is intelligently asking the right follow-up questions, diving down to the root of employee issues, and escalating those issues in the right way. So there's several things that Kim is capable of. Her core capabilities are understanding employee needs, like I mentioned, asking intelligent follow-up questions, diving to the root of issues. She can route employees to the right resources that are available in your organization, so providing them with on-the-spot solutions where possible. She can intelligently identify issues that need to be escalated up, the ones that immediately need to go to a person or route to this specific leader, depending on the category of feedback that we're hearing. Kim's also a mechanism to add measurability and ROI into feedback. So rather than having purely subjective conversations, we have a lot of sophisticated metrics that help you to prioritize and help you to also see if the needle is moving or not. And most importantly, Kim's a tool to drive continuous improvement. Kim is a mechanism to have scalable, repeatable conversation with your employees. What we found is that employees really resonate with this experience. This is an employee at a client of ours saying that he feels like he has a new friend. He wasn't comfortable chatting directly to leadership about particular issues, so he likes that he has Kim available as a resource. And we found that employees tend to have this kind of response because they feel that they're not being judged, that they're able to talk transparently with confidence. And there's two ways that employees can chat with Kim. And whether you use a technology like Weave or not, we recommend that you have these two communication pipelines. First is that anytime an employee has a need that they want to escalate, Kim is an always available hotline that they can reach out to and be confident that it's going to go to the right person. Much more commonly, Kim is going to reach out in order to understand employee sentiment around specific topic areas. As I mentioned earlier, often we're doing this as triggered off of external events in the company to check in and understand how employees are doing. For example, if employees just went through a new training, Kim would check in both to measure on comprehension and retention, but also to understand what kinds of micro adjustments need to be made in the next set of trainings. What are the immediate pieces of feedback that we can take and make immediate improvement? And we found for this specific example, we have organizations rather than taking a once a year training and then not making any improvements to it until the next year, they're able to run that same piece of content with micro changes to make it more and more targeted to the needs of the employees at that specific time in their life cycles. Now, to David's point earlier, this is a kind of one-stop shop in terms of the dialogues and conversations that you're able to have with employees. We have over 100 topics that we support out of the box. We can also support any custom topic. Kim has the ability to understand, to do real-time topic analysis and routing, which you're going to see in just a second. We're typically seeing use cases around measuring employee sentiment and emotion. Often this is replacing an existing yearly survey or pulse survey. Kim is a always available pipeline to go straight from the ground to the leaders that want to make sure that they're hearing employee needs in a timely manner. She's a mechanism for ensuring that employees are kept up to date on the latest tools and resources that are available in the organization so that you're making the most of your other investments, and the money that you're putting into building out other employee resources is something that you're making sure is actually being used by employees. Kim is also used for early risk identification. She's able to capture issues that may have bubbled up into very public incidents before it gets to that level. And as I mentioned before, we've got a lot of breadth and depth on data to also help make strategic decisions. But a key piece is we understand that analytics themselves are not improvement. We surface a lot of great analytics post conversation. Those are things like emotional analysis, sentiment analysis, topic insights. But the important thing to remember is you can't just do the job of collecting the data. You have to do something about that. And this is the trap that we see companies fall into all the time, because either they're relying on managers that don't have the training or know-how in order to take the next steps, or because they're using technologies that are really good at gathering data, but don't have the right process in order to take action on that data. And that's why we built a path to improvement. It starts with having conversations to understand employee issues, and then broadcasting to say, hey, we heard you. This is what we're going to do about your issues, or even to say, hey, we heard you and we need your help in order to figure out what to do next. And that's where crowdsourcing comes in, engaging employees in solution building to kick off action planning and to make the process transparent and involved from an employee's point of view. And finally, this is not a one and done. We're going to continue to check in with employees over time, saying, hey, you told us about an issue. You even gave us some suggestions on how to improve it. Have we moved the needle? This ensures that you're keeping the conversation continuous. You're getting really measurable ROI on your issue to action times, and you're incrementally but constantly moving forward in making improvement. What we found is that organizations that use Weave, on average, are able to increase their issue to action timelines by about 18x. Now, this is a process that Kim drives for Weave. Whether you use our tool or not, this is a path that we recommend you follow, and we recommend you follow these principles. At the end of the day, the process that you want to build is that employees should feel, if I engage in the feedback cycle, my issues are going to be solved in a timely manner. And from a people leader's perspective, I should feel that I always know what action to take next. I never have to ask, okay, what do I do now, when moving from identification to resolution of an issue. I'm going to take a moment now to actually show you what an interaction with Kim looks like from an employee's point of view. So I'm going to put myself into the shoes of an employee that is chatting with Kim. For those of you that may have attended an earlier DEI session, you would have seen this conversation. Now, Kim has reached out to me to understand my thoughts on influence and mentorship at this company. This is a conversation that Kim would have based off of an understanding that this is a area that the company is focusing on improving, or have identified an employee group that may not have the right access or the equitable rates of career progression. In either case, it's a trigger-based conversation. I know this is an area that is of importance to this set of employees, and Kim has reached out to me for that reason. So the first question that she's got for me is if I feel that I'm included in the decisions that impact my work. Now, this is a completely open text experience. So I'm going to say, not really. Just last week, I was trying to convince my manager to extend deadlines. No one listened. My grammatical, spelling issues, all that stuff gets cleaned up by Kim in the back end. But more importantly, she's using natural language processing to understand the right kinds of follow-up questions to kind of dive in and identify trends or get to the root of employee issues. In this case, she wants to know if this is a trend that I'm experiencing at the company. So I'm going to say, yeah, we are supposed to have scrums where we have input on decisions, but it's just a few people in that meeting that decide everything. Now, a thing that we've talked about a lot is empathy. Now, what does empathy actually look like from a chatbot's perspective? In this case, we use emotional analysis to kind of understand that this is an area that would be frustrating for an employee. But much more importantly, we're not leaving the employee out to dry. So of course, this data is going to be escalated upwards and leaders are going to be able to see that. But more importantly, wherever possible, we want to give employees next steps that they themselves can take and kind of have that sense of empowerment. Our North Star metric that we measure is issue to action time. And so we do whatever we can to make that as short as possible. Sometimes that means getting the right data to the right person as quickly as possible. Sometimes it means asking the right questions to the right person. And sometimes if we have a next step that an employee can take in conversation and we can help someone with the next step in real time, that's what we're always aiming for. In this case, Kim is integrated with this company's learning management system. She's identified me as an employee that doesn't have maybe the right access to influencing decisions. In this case, I'm saying that I'm not really being heard in meetings. So she's routing me over to our LMS, where I can go and access some courses on how can I increase my own influence on meetings. So we're trying to address the issue both from the leader manager end, but also present the employee with the next steps. Now, the next question is, God, is if there's anyone in management that advocates for me, I'm going to say, no, I try to talk to Dave, but he's never got time. Now, again, Kim has a understanding of what are the initiatives that are happening in the organization. In this case, I'm someone that doesn't really have access to the right mentorship or right counseling. So she's going to route me over to the company's new mentorship program. That might be a way for me to rapidly resolve these issues that I'm seeing. Now, last thing I want to show you here is some more of the conversational nature of Kim and what we do as part of the trust building process. So a really common question that we get from employees is like, are you really anonymous? What's happening with my data? Why should I trust you? Those kinds of questions. So those are things that Kim is able to recognize and kind of answer conversationally in stride and help build that relationship with employees. Ultimately, we're not trying to replace any sort of leader-employee one-on-ones or face-to-face conversations with the conversations that happen with Kim. What we want to do is make those face-to-face conversations, rather than focused on diagnosis, they're focused more on solutioning and actionability and next steps, and the diagnosis happens in conversations with Kim. The last thing I want to show you is what happens when we have issues that a bot should not handle. I'll just say something like, I'm being bullied. This is something we don't really want the bot to be able to handle. So instead, serious issues, we are able to flag if we believe that they're potentially serious, and we can put them up into an escalation flow so that the right human is able to reach out to me and help me with the more sensitive next steps. What makes this especially powerful is based off of the type of issue that we're seeing. We can make sure it escalates to the right specific person in the organization that deals with those kinds of issues. Now that you've seen a good bit of the conversation with Kim, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them into chat, whether that's things that Kim is capable of doing or anything else around the technology. In the meantime, I'm going to show you what some of these results look like. So this is for a different conversation that Kim had earlier with a group of sample employees. This was just getting feedback on a company that had new management and new leadership come in. This was post an acquisition. And the company wanted to understand how the merging of teams is going. So what we can see here is At a quick glance, I can see the overall sentiment that employees have around their management and leadership. And then I can also see the dominant emotions that were present in those conversations. I can also see what were the main topics that were being discussed, and we'll dive more into that in just a second, as well as the specific questions that were being asked, and a teaser of the most relevant feedback that we saw when asking those questions. Now, our topic analysis is built to kind of, at a very quick glance, understand what are the areas that I need to be taking action on. In this case, I can very quickly see by this low sentiment that there is an issue with career development. On click, I'm able to see what are all the things that people are saying about this particular topic area, the emotions of those, and the idea being, at a quick glance of how red a bar is or how unhappy a face is, I know the areas that I need to be prioritizing. Now, if I need to, I can, of course, dive in a little bit deeper. I can dive in a little bit deeper into a specific question. I can see everything that employees have said in regards to this, which I can search through by keyword. I can filter through by topic. And if I need to, if I'm doing this conversation over a large group of employees, I can actually slice and dice this data by my departments, by my locations, really by any set of user properties that you're managing. You can see what your different demographics are saying. Now, at this step, I have a pretty decent idea of what the issues are. And broadly speaking, issues fall into two buckets. There's issues that I know what to do about, and there's issues where I don't know what to do. So for the former, we have a fairly simple broadcasting functionality. In here, whatever a leader types in, Kim is going to broadcast back to the team. So an example, we have a client that's a healthcare organization. Obviously, the last year has been very tough from the healthcare perspective, and we saw a lot of issues from night shift nurses who were losing their minds because their break room only ever had stale leftover food from day shift. This is the kind of issue management wasn't really keeping track of. But as soon as they found out about it through a conversation with Kim, it was quite simple for them to fix. So through a broadcast, within 24 hours of getting that feedback, they're able to say, hey, we heard you. We're stocking up with fresh food every night for you now. So it's a really easy way to close the loop on those kinds of issues. We also see this broadcasting being used to sometimes say, hey, we heard you. We're not doing anything about it. And this is why. We often get questions about, like, what about that feedback that we can't do anything about? There's no way that we can build fast issue to action timelines. In those cases, you don't need to get from issue to resolution. You just need to get from issue to response. So if you have employees that are asking for something that's simply not feasible, this is a mechanism to respond and say, we heard you, this is why. What makes this a little more powerful is that I can target my broadcasting based off of the emotion that users had when talking about this topic. So for example, I could reach out only to my employees that were frustrated or sad when talking about this issue. And so in that way, I can have simultaneously a targeted but still anonymous way to reach out to my employees. Now, not all feedback is going to be that easy, obviously, and that's where our crowdsourcing capability comes in. Here, Kim is going to reach out to members of your team saying something like, hey, we heard about an issue in this area. We're trying to get some suggestions on what we need to do about it. Do you have any ideas? What this becomes is it feeds into a action planning flow for people leaders where they can kind of get inspiration or immediately actionable next steps from the people who are actually being impacted by these issues. And most critically is you can also set it so Kim is going to continue to reach out over time to say, hey, you told me about this issue. I went and you gave me some suggestions of what we should do. Have we resolved the issue or not? And then leaders are going to get real-time updates on where does this issue fall from not resolved to resolved. That way, the needle is always being measured. There's always a process for continuous and iterative improvement. Now that was a really quick kind of run through of our platform. If you have any questions on either the reporting piece or the conversational AI, again, feel free to put it back in chat. In the meantime, I'm just going to jump back over to this deck. And if any of this is something that you feel could be interesting for your organization, or even if you want to have a chat about just the technology, you can book time with someone on our team by going to weave.ai/meet Kim, where you can actually see a specific demo of conversations that Kim can have to address your use cases and your unique needs at your organization. Okay. I don't see any questions in chat. So in that case, thank you everyone for your time. I hope you're able to find something interesting here, and I hope that the principles are something that you'll take over to your own organizations. If you're interested in learning more about Weave, you can visit us at weave.ai. And again, if you want a custom demo for your use cases, please book time with us at weave.ai/meet Kim. Thank you.